some good water. You guys ever have an idea and you just get started with it and everything just goes smoothly start to finish? Well, neither have I. I've had this project that I've been wanting to work on for a very long time, and I have gotten started on it multiple times, but every single time I get started on it, I learn a new technology, and then I'm like, maybe I should implement that instead of just, continuing and maybe implementing it later in the future. I stop everything and try to build it from scratch once again. My goal is to stop doing that. I think today should be the day when we get started on actually building something, start to finish, and get it up and running. But we need to start somewhere. So today, we're just gonna be focusing on building the foundation to a website from scratch, also with mobile development as well. I do wanna start dabbling around with some mobile apps. That's something I also want to implement as well. Let's get started on this thing, All right, let's get to coding. The tools that we're going to be using for this project is we're going to be using Node, making it an Express server as well as a GraphQL server. So they're going to be combined. Apollo server, and we're going to be using React, React Native, Prisma, and Postgres. And I think that's the core of it. We're going to have 3 components to this. So we're going to have the API, the web application, and the mobile application. We're just going to create a new folder. We'll just call it API. And then we're going to change directories into that. And let's start it off with npm init. And this will create a package.json file for us. And that's pretty much the core of any Node application. This has all the packages that you install, how to actually run all the scripts and everything. That's all going to be located in this file. Let's install some packages. So let's just run yarn add, and then all the packages that we're going to need. All right, so that should be the list of all the packages that we need. We can just start installing them. It might take a second. All right, so now we have all those packages installed, and if we take a look at our package.json file, we could see that we have all the packages installed in that file. We're also going to need some developer packages as well, and we can install those. Similar command that we used before. So yarn add, except we're going to add in a tag with a D, and that's just going to say these are developer packages only to be used in a development environment. So these are some of the packages that we're going to need. All right, and if we take a look back at our package.json file, we could see that they are in their own category called dev dependencies. We do need a tsconfig file because we are using TypeScript, and we can install that with npx tsconfig, tsconfig.json. And we are going to be using Node for the API. And there's our tsconfig.json file. This just has a bunch of presets in it, but one thing to note is right here in out directory, that's going to tell TypeScript once it builds and compiles the file to put all of the built files into this directory, which is going to be created once you run the build command in a distribution folder. And that's just where all the built files are going to be. I guess now we could start actually writing the code. So let's just create a new folder, and let's call this source. And our main folder we'll call app.ts because it's a TypeScript. And then we could just add an extra file called server, and then it's going to be a .ts file for TypeScript. And for now, let's just build a very basic Express application. We're just declaring our application as an Express application. And then right here, we're saying in the home directory, anytime that there's a request, we're just going to send back hello world. And then down here, we're just telling Express to listen to port 4000 on our computer. So now we could actually run this. If we run, actually, we need to check our package.json file. And we actually don't even have a script for it yet. So that's something that we do need to do. So let's just add in another command, and we'll just say dev. And for our dev command, we're going to run nodemon execute ts node, and then source server .ts. So now we could run npm run dev, and that will run the dev script in our package.json file, which will execute all this code. We could press enter, and then we could see in our terminal that it seems to be working. So we have an Express application listening on port 4000, which has been called here. And now if we open up in our browser, so if we open up to localhost port 4000, then we could see hello world there. So our API is working. But I did mention that I wanted to build a GraphQL API on top of Express. And for that, there's a little bit more configuration, and that's where Apollo Server comes into play. All right, so I just configured our API to use GraphQL. There's a little bit more configuration, as you could see, but this is just following the standard that's set in place on Apollo. If you just look up Apollo Server and just go through the getting started tutorial, all of the steps will be in here and it will all make sense. I did have to add in an extra file called default resolver, and that is pretty much just going to handle certain queries from the GraphQL standpoint, a little different than just a regular REST API. And if we just take a look at that file, we can see that we have created a function called hello. And when that's called from the GraphQL standpoint, it's just going to return the string hi. We could start running this. So if we do npm run dev again and just wait for that to spin up, we could see that it has started on port 4000 again. We could open this up and refresh, and we see that we are still getting the hello world from the REST API. And then from the GraphQL, if we add in GraphQL at the end of our URL, it'll pull up the sandbox for it, or not. Why you know work? I think it's because I'm using use here. Try changing that to get and see what happens. All right, so that seemed to fix it. The issue there was when I was using use, it would overwrite every other endpoint. And now when you type in the GraphQL endpoint at the end of it, you get this sandbox. And if we see from the sandbox, we have some of our functions, and we have our hello function here. It'll go over the details of it, any descriptions, and also the schema. And we could just run it. If we just type in hello here and press play, then we get our string hi. A very, very detailed API, I know, very advanced, very elaborate, but this is just building the framework, which is the whole point of this video. All right, next stage, let's work on building the front-end web application. All right, so what we're gonna need for the web application is we're gonna be using React for this, and I kind of forget how to start the React app. And I also wanna use TypeScript, and it's pretty simple to create a React app. So let's just search create React app. And if we go here, actually I wanna do create React app with TypeScript. And this looks like what we're gonna need. So we could run this command. So let's just split the screen real quick and type it in manually. Let's call this the web, and we're going to use template TypeScript. And this is going to take a minute for it to install, because there's a lot of packages that it's going to install. And we can see that it created a bunch of files for us, which is awesome because that saves us a lot of time. So we could see here are some of the packages that it did install. If you notice, there's nothing on here that says GraphQL, which is what we're going to be using. So for that, let's just take a look at Apollo client is what we're going to need. And we'll just go on the website. All right, and it should be as simple as just installing these two packages. So we could just do yarn add at Apollo client and GraphQL. And I just realized I'm in the wrong directory. And those seem to have installed correctly. And there's one other small thing that we could just configure while we're at it. If we go to the app.tsx and we go back to the page here, we're going to need to create a client, and that will pretty much have all the configuration set up for us to make requests to our APIs in the future. So just having this set up now is just going to save more time. So let's just say our client is going to be a new Apollo client. And as we set up earlier, our API is going to be at localhost, and we used port 4000. So we can just input that there. And then if we scroll down in app, we could use Apollo provider, which is another thing we're going to need to import from here. All right, and we should be all good to go to actually run this. So let's just run npm start in this directory, and let's see if we get any errors. It doesn't look like it. All right, so it seems to have worked, and there's no errors. That's good. So now we have our web app set up, we have our API, and the last thing we want to get set up is React Native with our mobile application. So for our mobile application, since we are right now only developing it, we're not going into production, we're going to be using what's called Expo. And Expo is an app that you could find in the App Store or Google Play Store, Android Store, whatever store on your phone. And you could download Expo and actually run your code on your phone, which is awesome because you don't have to actually go through the process of getting it certified by whatever store and getting it published and all that stuff. Expo's already certified. It'll just run and compile all of your code. So for that, let's actually just open up our browser again and search how to configure it with TypeScript. So this seems like the command that we're going to need to use. Let's try it out. Let's just copy that. Let's call this one mobile. So now we have React Native installed, or our mobile application installed. It should be already pre-configured, which is great. The only thing we're missing is Apollo client for our mobile application. And we could just go back to our browser and say React Native Apollo client. And let's see what we have to do. It looks pretty much the same as with our regular React app. Let's change into our mobile, npm install. So now we have that installed, and we just need to add this to our main app file, which is app.tsx. And using the same URI or the same URL for our API as we used before. All right, so now we should be all good to go to actually run this thing. So if we just run yarn start or npm start, whichever one, we could see whatever this is. And this is actually what Expo is. It's just like an interface between your raw code and your mobile application. So since it's a mobile application, we could see that we don't really get anything here. We could run in web browser and have it open up a new tab for us and see what it would look like in a browser, but that's not really what we're writing this for. We're writing it for mobile devices. So how can we test that out on our computer? Well, that's where Android Studio comes in. So you could go to Android Studio's website and just follow the instructions on how to install it from their website. It just takes a little bit to download because it is a pretty bulky application. But once you have it installed, we could just open it up. Once you start running Android Studio, you'll be prompted with the home screen. And from here, you could just go to Configure and then AVD Manager. And this is where you could start running emulators, which will emulate a bunch of Android devices. So we could just hit play and just have the default Pixel one come up. And let's go back to the tab with Expo running. And then from here, we could see that we have a prompt saying run on Android device / emulator. Now, if you click that, it'll just do exactly that. It'll try to run it on that emulator that you just started up right here. So we'll click it and wait for it to load up. It starts compiling. And now we could see, it's really hard to see up in the corner, but we have hello world up there. Similar with the website, we could just do changes on the fly. So if we wanted to say hello everyone, and then we press save, we could see up here that it changes to hello everyone. And this is awesome because you don't actually have to whip out your phone and check and do all, it's just all on the same screen, which makes it so much easier for development. But if you did want to actually see what it would look like on your phone, you could just scan this QR code on the screen with your phone. It'll prompt you to install Expo, and then you can just run it on your phone. So I just have my Expo app opened. We can see that there's no projects in there. Oh, my screen is kind of greasy right now. But I'm just gonna scan this, the QR code. Oh, let's see if this will focus. It's kind of hard to see on this camera, but on the top corner it just says hello world. So we actually have our application running on our iPhone as well as the Android emulator. So we could compare how it works on like an Apple device or an Android device. As long as you have the Expo app installed, you're good to go. So it makes it super simple to develop mobile applications as well. That's pretty much it. So now we have the foundation to an API, a web app, as well as a mobile application all set up. We could start building upon this, start connecting them, integrating them together, and maybe in the future we'll actually get it out into production and in a real world scenario. But that's really it for today, and I'll see you guys next time.